I want to switch topics because there's a lot to talk about here too, and this is the issue of student job grants and whether or not the government should have a say in sort of values and determining values around these grants. Here's a clip of the Minister, Patty Hajdu.
Our ministry is saying that we believe in the Canadian Human Rights and Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that these are fundamental expectation of Canadians is that we stand up for those rights, and that we ensure that the money that we disperse on behalf of Canadians is not used in a way that violates those hard-won rights.
Josh, what do you make of the strategy here by the Liberals in terms of why they're doing this, and then what the potential consequence could be, if any, because maybe they're alienating voters that they just didn't have?
Yeah, I think the Liberals like to sort of comfort themselves by thinking that they don't go down these sort of values paths that Stephen Harper, in their view, went down too often. But they go down them a lot, and they also have a habit of letting storms brew before they really realize that they're brewing. We saw that on the tax reform in the summer, and frankly, it looks like the Liberals are getting caught flat-footed as a bunch of faith groups are coming forward and say they're being hit with something that the Liberal government says they actually won't be hit with. So I suppose the proof will be in the pudding. But you look on the form that they're asked to sign, and it's pretty explicit in one paragraph and then keeps going for 2 or 3 more. And you can see why it would be hard for a church group that runs, say, a summer camp to look at this and say, well, the jobs I'm hiring for aren't, campaigning against a specific right, but the view of my faith group is not necessarily aligned with the view of Patty Hajdu or Justin Trudeau. So I can get my funding for my job, but it means clicking a box that goes against my faith. That's the position that a lot of these faith groups say they're in. What do you make of that, Chantal? It did seem a little surprising from the Liberals. I agree with Josh. It's something I would have more expected from the Conservatives around the sort of values that they promote.
And if it had come from the Conservatives, but in the reverse, there would be an uproar across the land. I find it heavy-handed, but I also find the rationale that the minister put forward surprising, because if you were so concerned about respecting the Charter of Rights and whatever, you would have some concern over respecting the freedom of religion and the freedom of expression. Yes. And the form that they've put forward, nominally to prevent groups from getting money to campaign against access to abortion, does not respect any of those freedoms.
Andrew.
I don't find this surprising at all from this government. We saw this with the edict banning pro-life candidates from running for the party. We saw it with the ruckus they made over Rachel Harder being appointed or put forward as chairwoman of the Status of Women Committee. This is a government that is, whether out of sincere conviction or political calculation, is utterly intolerant of any difference of opinion on this point of view. They are trying to marginalize and demonize people who have differing points of view on this particular question. Look, we're the only country in the democratic world that has no abortion law. Now, that might be a good thing or a bad thing, but we're the outliers here. We're not the norm. We got that not because it was ever decreed that this was against the Charter. In fact, the Supreme Court went out of its way to propose how they might draft a new abortion law when they struck down the old one. The reason we don't have an abortion law is not because Parliament ruled on that. The House of Commons passed a new law. It died on a tie vote in the Senate. So all of these things are part of the historical record, and for the government to pretend that this is just beyond the pale for anybody to have a differing point of view in this, that everybody else are the extremists and the fanatics on this, I suggest they need to look at themselves in the mirror.
I only have a couple of minutes, but is it possible that this is actually a tactical move to try and get the Conservatives who are in favor of abortion to be more vocal and pump up that base that Andrew Scheer is trying to quiet down?
Well, that sounds almost too smart for the way they're going about it. To tell you the truth, I'm not even going to go down the tactical route. Yes, possibly it is seen in some quarters as a political play to send a message to women that we stand for pro-choice on abortion. But it's done in such a heavy-handed way that even if you are pro-choice, you look at this and you think, what about the precedent? That some government that doesn't feel exactly the same way applies the same method because that's how it feels about things, and you think that can't be right.
And I only have a minute left, Josh, but it also goes after it goes after young people, which I thought the government was trying to promote in terms of getting jobs and stuff. So it seems a weird place to go after as well. Yeah, I mean, 2 things. I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They put this out there, but now they're walking it back and saying, no, apply. And they're actually calling groups that got
funding in the past and saying, go for it. But the other thing is I think this government tries to pick fights that it wants to be in politically. I think we're seeing that a bit with climate. It would only be too happy to fight Jason Kenney and Brad Wall on climate. And I think on this, they absolutely are sending a signal to their base of voters, which is more heavily women and more heavily young than at least the Conservatives, that we're in your corner on this one issue to the point that we're willing to risk looking like we're gaming the system of federal funding to go to bat for it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Andrew, Chantal, and Josh, good to see you.